Well, welcome one and all to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Manhattan. It's my joy to serve as the minister here, and I'm so glad to be back after 4 weeks away. My name is Pastor Isabel Call, and I'm so glad to be here. I'm glad for us to be together embodying our mission as a diverse, evolving spiritual community acting for a better world. I want to invite you, if you have a joy or a sorrow and you're here in the sanctuary, to write it down so I can read it aloud later during the service. You'll find some paper in a box near you. And welcome visitors, newcomers of all ages. We're glad that you're here. Welcome here in the sanctuary. Welcome here on Zoom. Shirley is our greeter today, and Karen is our Zoom host. They're especially available to welcome you and answer questions, but everybody else is too. It is our practice to arrive at our service by acknowledging the land upon which we gather, the ancestors of this land and their descendants. Today, we will draw upon the wisdom of our spiritual cousin, the German Jewish philosopher Martin Buber. This reading that Tom Phillips will do for us is from Martin Buber's book, I and Thou, which if you're here in the sanctuary, you can find the book on the back table. And it draws us into a reciprocal rather than colonizing relationship with the world around us.
Thank you, Issa. I contemplate a tree. I can accept it as a picture, a rigid pillar in a column of light, or splashes of green, traversed by the gentleness of the blue-silver ground. I can feel it as movement, the flowing veins around the sturdy, striving core, the sucking of roots, the breathing of the leaves, the infinite commerce with earth and air, and the growing itself in its darkness. I can assign it to a species and observe it as an instance, with an eye to its construction and its way of life. I can overcome its uniqueness and form so rigorously that I recognize it only as an expression of the law, those laws according to which the elements mix and separate. I can dissolve it into a number, into a pure relation between numbers. Throughout all of this, the tree remains my object and has its place and its time span, its kind and condition. But it can also happen, if will and grace are joined, that as I contemplate the tree, I'm drawn into a relation and the tree ceases to be an it. This does not require me to forego any of the modes of contemplation. There is nothing that I must not see in order to see, and there is no knowledge that I must forget. Rather is everything, picture and movement, species and instance, law and number, included and inseparably fused. Whatever belongs to the tree is included, its form and its mechanics, its colors and its chemistry, its conversation with the elements, and its conversation with the stars. All this in its entirety. The tree is no impression, no play of my imagination, no aspect of a mood. It confronts me boldly. One should not try to dilute the meaning of the relation. Relation is reciprocity. This reading is adapted from the first few pages of the book by the philosopher Martin Buber, and the title of the book is I and Thou. Humanity can speak two basic words. The basic words are not single words, but word pairs. One basic word is the word pair I, you. The other basic pair is the word pair I, it. But this basic word is not changed when he or she or they takes the place of it. The I of the basic word I, you is different from that in the basic word I, it. Basic words do not state something that might exist outside them. By being spoken, they establish a mode of existence. Basic words are spoken with one's being. The basic word I, you can only be spoken with one's whole being. The basic word I, it can never be spoken with one's whole being. The basic word I, you establishes the world of relation. In every sphere of this world, through everything that becomes present to us, we gaze toward the eternal you. In each, we perceive a breath of it. In every you, we address the eternal you.
I was delighted when Sandy showed me the blessing tag that she made for today. To be clear, I'm always delighted at her creative and generous attention to the art and craft of religious education, but this blessing in particular is perfect on many levels. She told me, and she's referenced today, she'd considered the phrase, I got this, instead of you got this, since the person carrying the backpack is the one who's got this. So they might want to announce to the world, I got this. But she settled on you got this because we, UUFM, are blessing the backpack carrier. We are telling them, you got this. It's an I-you communication, spoken with our whole being, establishing a mode of existence. And isn't that what religious education is all about? Has been all about since before Sandy, and certainly through Sandy's leadership. And will continue to be all about as we take the baton from Sandy and pass it, hopefully, to a new coordinator, director. In Unitarian Universalist religious education, we honor the unique and precious being of each person, regardless of their age, but especially the young ones. We address them as you, not it. We talk with them, not about them. And when we're with them, and when we talk about the world with them, the world is not an it, it's an us. Our conversations about God, spirit, or mystery, the stars, bugs, viruses, religion, sex, social action, these conversations establish a mutual mode of existence. We're helping them understand that this is a life worth living. When we say, you got this, we're also saying, we've got you. No matter what you believe, you belong to us. We belong to you. And when I say to somebody, when I was blessing people earlier, you got this, my confidence in them comes from the confidence that's been placed in me. As Unitarian Universalists, we don't just believe in IU relationships, we don't even just practice them, we organize our communities to cultivate them. Our religious education programs help us raise our kids to celebrate their you-ness, their uniqueness, the kinds of relationships that only they can have, and only when they show up as themselves. By investing in professional religious educators, we preserve the educational tradition of our faith. We connect to UU history, values, traditions, and practices. We cultivate leadership to adapt and use all that we've inherited to empower this and future generations of young people to make their values real in the world. I think we have a call to build and maintain and grow robust UU institutions, not because I think the world should be more UU, but because I think UUism helps the world be more loving. Unitarian Universalism is the means, not the end. And Sandy sums this up nicely when she says that UU religious education is not about making good Unitarian Universalists. It's about making good people. We make great people here. It speaks as much to our success as anything that they don't necessarily stick around. We give them roots and we give them wings, and many of them fly, and their scheduled landings aren't necessarily on Zinedale Road at 10:45 on Sunday mornings. And that's fine. Religious education at its best requires a lot of goodbyes. We don't always say them out loud or even bring them to consciousness, but every time we learn something new, a piece of our old worldview slips away, or we set it down consciously. We call graduations commencements perhaps because it's easier to focus on what we're commencing than what we're leaving behind. But the goodbye is at the heart of growth, whether or not we're conscious of it. And if we're honest, that growth does come with grief. There is a lot to deconstruct and retell in the story of Adam and Eve from the Hebrew Bible, but I appreciate the symbolic power of losing paradise when you gain knowledge. Maybe you relate to that. I would say collectively, this congregation got a serious dose of religious education when we said goodbye to normal Sunday mornings in March of 2020. When we took the pandemic seriously, it ceased to be an it we were trying to control or ignore, and it became a catalyst for creative relationship building. It certainly changed a lot about religious education programming for families. In particular, because many kids were over-Zoomed at school and had even less patience for Sunday morning Zooming than many of our most impatient adults. But Sandy had relationships with families, and she stayed in touch. She made calls, she wrote letters, she created alternative events. And when we came back in person, she personally staffed programs that weren't drawing the same kind of adult volunteer presence that we might have expected pre-pandemic. Sandy told me when I got here in fall of 2021 that y'all had wandered into and were still wandering through the COVID woods, and it was going to take at least as much time to get out. That big picture balcony perspective was really helpful for me arriving, and I know it was helpful for you all. And I think, I'll say that this past week when I met with her, she said, I think we're out of the woods. And so a part of blessing her at this moment is acknowledging that she's been with us through that voyage through the woods, a consistent companion, present and steady through the journey. We're glad to say goodbye to those woods, and not so glad to say goodbye to Sandy. Goodbyes can be incredibly painful, and I think that's because of how sudden they sometimes are. Loss can arrive with no notice and cause us trauma. I think it's probably happened to each of us in some way, a sudden death, an unwelcome job change, a breakup out of the blue, a diagnosis. And on some level, we try to control things. And even when we have a chance to prepare for a loss, even a relatively small loss, we'd rather not. Some of us, we'd rather pretend we can avoid it altogether. How many of you know someone who tries to sneak away at the end of a family gathering? Or maybe that's you. Or sneak away after the service on a Sunday morning. Yeah, and we may have friends. I've been this person who moves out of town without giving much notice. Sort of calls you like, hey, I moved, bye. If you point out what they're doing, they might say something like, well, I'm sorry, I'm just not good at goodbyes. One of the things we get to do here is practice goodbyes. When we say goodbye to a member who's getting transferred to another job, or a departing staff member, or a young adult spreading their wings, we're practicing to say goodbye to a loved one at the end of their life, exercising our hearts. When we attend a celebration of life and laugh and cry at all the details we hadn't put together quite like that before, we're preparing for letting go of our own lives, which does, of course, happen to us all. When we say goodbye to a new loss with our whole being, the grief of previous losses holds us more gently. A good goodbye resonates and heals. When I was in grad school, I rented a room from someone who was used to student roommates. I became friends with her. We cooked together, we blended our pantry and our kitchen implements. And you should also know for this story that we lived in a community where it was common to leave your doors unlocked. When it was time for me to move across town, she told me, I love you, and I am looking forward to running into you around town. We might even choose to stay in touch. But when you move out, I need you to move all the way out. If you forget your colander, do not come back next month and take it when I'm not at home. That is just too hard for me, she said. And it wasn't just because she would be really irritated next time she made pasta. She needed closure. And I did too, though I didn't have as much practice as she did. And so it is with the departure of a religious professional. Unitarian Universalist ministers are required to do 1 or 2 year internships with congregations that we didn't grow up in. So we're supposed to go somewhere new, and with whom we will ultimately say goodbye. It is the practice for a departing religious professional, whether they're an intern or a settled minister or a DRE, to move all the way out when the time comes, either taking or leaving their metaphorical pasta strainer, and then staying away until the settled minister can tell, okay, we've moved on. And this is the covenant that Sandy and I have with each other, that she will reconnect with us as a congregation through conversation with me. So she'll be in conversation with me about that. And I'll be sensing when we're ready. She's glad to say hi at the grocery store, but she's fully setting aside fellowship, business, and community life until we no longer feel that pressing desire to reach out and get input and ask questions and continue to do religious education the way we have been doing it with her. She needs to retire and we need to take responsibility for our religious education program. In my experience after my ministerial internship, I really needed time and mental and emotional space to develop my new professional relationships. And the congregation I left needed space to integrate the ministry that I'd offered to make it their own. And perhaps most importantly, on a spiritual level, a good goodbye helped all of us grow. I know that now from reconnecting with members several years later. In a world where so much loss is haphazard, unplanned, and unloving, the graceful departure of a loving and beloved leader is a gift. But as Sandy departs, her grace must be matched with our own. So let us be graceful too as we let her go. We can be sad when we're being graceful. I'm feeling a great deal of grief in losing my colleague. But I also know that I'm already changed by her, that I have shown up. I know that I have shown up to my time with her with my full being. And I know I have a few more weeks to do that. I bless this change for her and for us. I'm grateful in so many ways to Sandy, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to say goodbye. So perhaps this service has blessed you or opened up for you an opportunity to say goodbye to Sandy or to another person or memory from your past that you realize you haven't yet let go of. Maybe there's a memory or a feeling, an image from the past about the fellowship that's in the past that it might be time to let go of. I invite you to allow yourself to move from the past into the present, to bless and be blessed right here and now as you are. You got this. We got this. So let us wander with our backpacks blessed. Let us wander where we will.